Have you ever resized a photo and it suddenly turned into a blurry mess? In this video I'll show you how to resize an image without losing quality. You'll learn 9 practical tips that can be used in any editor. If you post photos on social media, run a website, or design visual content, this will save you a lot of frustration. Let's start. What resizing really does and why images get blurry. When you resize a photo, you're actually changing the number of pixels in it. When you reduce the size, pixels are merged or discarded. When you enlarge an image, the software has to create new pixels and guess what they should look like. If that guess isn't accurate, you end up with blur, blockiness, or jagged edges. So, how do you resize an image without losing quality? Let's move on to the key tips you need to know. Tip number 1: DPI doesn't matter on screens. Here's something a lot of people get wrong when working with images. If you're using pictures for websites, social media, or anything digital, only pixel dimensions determine the quality, not the dots per inch value. I'll repeat that. DPI does not matter for screens. So whether your image says 72 DPI, 96 DPI, or 300 DPI in its metadata, it won't make it sharper on your phone or computer. Screens don't care about DPI, they only display pixels. If you're resizing photos for digital use and you want to resize an image without losing quality, forget about DPI. Focus on choosing the right pixel width and height. That's what controls how clear your image looks like. DPI only matters when you print a picture. Printers need that number to know how densely to place pixels on paper. But online, social media, websites, your phone, DPI is completely ignored. So remember, pixel size equals quality on screen. DPI equals quality on printed paper. Tip number 2, always check quality at 100% zoom. Before you panic thinking your image is low quality, make sure you're viewing it correctly. If you zoom too far in, or if your screen is much larger than the photo, your image viewer will resize it and it may look bad even if the actual file is fine. On a computer, always check the quality by viewing your image at 100% zoom, where 1 screen pixel equals 1 image pixel. How do you view an image at 100%? On Mac, open the image in Preview, go to View, Actual Size, or press Command +0. On Windows, open the image, use the Zoom drop-down, select 100%. So if your image looks sharp at 100%, you're good. If it's blurry, then it needs to be fixed. Tip number 3, start with the highest resolution you have. Tip number 3 might sound obvious, but it's incredibly important. Always start with an image of the highest resolution possible. A high-resolution image has more pixels, which means it holds more visual information, more texture, more detail, more edges, and more color transitions. Here's why that matters when resizing without quality loss. When you make an image smaller, your software merges similar pixels together. If you start with a lot of pixels, the algorithm has more data to work with, so the final result looks cleaner and sharper. On the other hand, when you enlarge an image, things get tricky. The software has to invent new pixels to fill in the gaps. If the original image has a small number of pixels, the program doesn't have enough information to guess what those new pixels should look like. And that's when you get blurriness, pixelation, or blocky edges. There's one exception though. This applies only to raster images like JPEG, PNG, GIF, BMP, and TIFF, because they're made up of a fixed number of pixels. Vector graphics are completely different. Files like SVG are built using mathematical equations, lines and curves, not pixels. That means you can resize them to any size, even a billboard, and they will never lose quality. That's exactly why logos, icons, and illustrations are often created as vector files. Tip number 4, don't ignore the aspect ratio. Our next tip is simple but super important. Never ignore the aspect ratio when resizing an image. If you change the pixel dimension without keeping the original aspect ratio, your image might get weirdly stretched or distorted. Circles will turn into ovals, faces and other objects will become unnaturally stretched. Definitely not a good look. Most online image resizers maintain the original aspect ratio automatically. You type in a new width and the height adjusts by itself. Easy. But some editors require you to turn on an option like lock aspect ratio or scale proportionally. So Always make sure it's enabled before resizing. But what if you need to change the aspect ratio? Let's say your original image is rectangular and high resolution and you need to get a smaller square from that. You can't just shrink it and call it a day, you need to change both the size and the aspect ratio. Can you do that without losing quality? Absolutely, and here are the 3 ways to do it right. Option 1. Crop the image. Cropping is the most common method. You simply cut out what you don't need and keep the main subject in the frame. It works best when there's extra space around the subject, for example, in product photos or minimal compositions. Option 2. Generate blurred pixels around the image. If you don't want to cut out anything, there's another trick. You can keep the full image and add blurred pixels along the sides to fill the empty space. This way, the center stays sharp. The aspect ratio changes, nothing important gets removed. Option 3. Add white margins. Similar idea, but instead of blurred pixels, you add white borders around the image. This keeps the entire image untouched, yet the aspect ratio changes. Some people like this clean look, especially for product shots or catalog-style images. Others don't, but it's still an effective way to resize without losing quality. So remember, aspect ratio matters just as much as pixel dimensions. Ignoring it leads to stretched, distorted images, and none of us want that. Tip number 5. Choose the right interpolation method. Now let's get a bit more technical. The choice of the interpolation method makes a huge difference. When you resize an image in an image editor, your computer doesn't just stretch or shrink it like a squishy toy. It uses a process called interpolation, which decides what to do with the pixels. There are several interpolation methods you'll typically see in image editors. The most common ones are nearest neighbor, bilinear, bicubic. You can usually choose these in the resample settings of advanced tools like Adobe Photoshop or even free tools such as Photopea. So which one should you use? If you want the best quality for most images, choose bicubic. Here's why. It analyzes 16 surrounding pixels instead of just 4 or 1 in comparison with other methods. It produces sharp edges, smoother gradients, and realistic textures. It's the standard for photography and professional editing. Nearest neighbor is fast, but it often creates blocky and pixelated results. Bilinear is smoother, but it's still blurrier than bicubic. But there's actually one more method, and it can beat bicubic in many cases. It is called Langsos. This method uses a more advanced mathematical filter. It's fantastic at preserving tiny details, and it produces an image that's sharp, crisp, and extremely clear. Langsos is especially great when resizing images with text like screenshots or infographics. The only downside? Not every app supports it. But here's some good news. Langsos is the only interpolation method used in Watermarkly's free image resizer. So if you're using this tool, you don't have to worry about choosing the right method, it's handled for you. Tip number 6. Change the image size gradually. Tip number 6. Avoid changing the size of an image too drastically in one step. If you need to resize by more than 2 times, it's better to do it gradually to avoid quality loss. Why does that matter? When you resize an image dramatically, for example downscale or enlarge it by 8 times in one step, the software has to do a lot of processing and guessing, and that usually destroys fine details, edges, and textures. Interpolation algorithms, the ones that calculate new pixels, work best when you scale in smaller increments, ideally no more than double or half the size per step. So instead of one giant jump, do something like this. Resize in multiple passes. For example, 3 steps of 1.5 times each will usually produce a much sharper image than one dramatic 4 times enlargement. In fact, some Photoshop and GIMP users only increase size by 10 to 20% at a time when upscaling. It takes longer, but the results are noticeably clearer. Tip number 7. Upscale images using AI tools. If you need to make an image a lot bigger, your best option is to use AI-based upscaling. Traditional methods like bicubic or Langsos resize images mathematically. They simply blend and average existing pixels. But AI upscaling does something much smarter. It actually creates new details based on context. Because AI models are trained on millions of images, they can predict and synthesize realistic textures, things like hair strands, fabric patterns, the sharp edges of shapes, and other fine details. Another advantage? AI allows you to scale images way beyond what traditional methods can do. While standard algorithms start to produce blurriness or artifacts after around 2 times enlargement, AI tools can upscale 4 to 6 times or even more, and the results will still look realistic. That's why AI is used for restoring old photos, remastering video, and upscaling textures in video games. But AI isn't perfect. Sometimes it can hallucinate details. It might invent textures that weren't there, add strange patterns, or even slightly change someone's face. So don't be surprised if eyelashes, pores, or wrinkles appear out of nowhere. Here's the rule of thumb: for moderate enlargement, up to 2 times, use bicubic or Langsos. For significant enlargement, beyond 2 times, use AI-based upscaling. Tip number 8. Crop instead of resize. Here's another trick that keeps quality high. Sometimes the best way to make an image smaller is to not resize it at all, just crop it. Let's say you don't need a specific image size. Maybe you shot a product photo and there's a ton of empty space around it, or maybe there are distracting objects in the background. In that case, crop your image. Remove all that extra space and distractions. You'll end up with a smaller file without changing the image quality at all, and all the attention will go to your main subject. In fact, cropping can sometimes produce a sharper and clearer result than changing the pixel dimensions. That's because you're not resizing the photo, you're simply cutting away parts you don't need. Cropping is especially useful for screenshots. It removes irrelevant areas and makes text easier to read without losing sharpness. So remember, if you don't need a specific size and you just want a cleaner, smaller image, crop first, resize only if you have to. Tip number 9. Make resizing the last step. The last tip is super important, and a lot of beginners don't know this one. You should resize your image only after you've finished all your editing. In other words, if you need to add text, a logo, a watermark, or any graphics, make sure you do that on the high-resolution original before you scale it down. Why? Text and logos contain sharp edges and tiny details. That's something your image software treats as high-frequency information, really precise shapes and lines. If you add text or a logo to a low-resolution image, those edges will get blurry. You'll see fuzzy letters and weird stroke thickness that looks uneven or too thick. But if you add your watermark or logo before resizing, while the image is still high-res, all of those sharp edges will shrink down cleanly. You'll get smooth, crisp details even in the final, smaller version. So here's a simple workflow you should follow. Start with the highest resolution you have. Do all your editing first. Color correction, retouching, text, logos, watermark, everything. Save that edited version at full resolution. Then resize it. Export the resized copy. That way you always keep a master high-resolution file that you can go back to anytime. And your final resized image will stay clean, sharp, and professional. So let's quickly recap how to resize images without losing quality. View at 100% zoom to judge the real quality. Start with a high-resolution original. Keep the original aspect ratio or use cropping or borders to change it. Use better interpolation, bicubic or Langsos. For big changes, resize gradually or use AI upscaling. Crop to focus on the subject instead of resizing the whole image. Make resizing the final step in your editing workflow. Follow these to get the best possible image quality after processing. If this video helped you finally understand how to resize images without quality loss, hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. What do you usually resize images for? Instagram, a website, or something else? And which of these methods work best for you? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.